My father spent 6 years telling his country club friends I was a high-powered finance executive in London. He burned my uniform photos and photoshopped my face onto an Oxford graduate's body. He thought his lies were bulletproof. He didn't account for twin UH-60 Black Hawks descending on his perfectly manicured lawn. I grew up in a world where appearances weren't just everything. They were the only thing. The Harrington estate, a sprawling 70-acre compound nestled in the wealthiest zip code in Connecticut, was my father's kingdom. Martin Harrington didn't just run a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm. He ran his family with the exact same ruthless, calculating precision. Every dinner party, every charity gala, every carefully orchestrated family portrait was a line item on his balance sheet of social capital. And I was supposed to be his greatest asset. From the time I was 10, my life was mapped out in high-definition detail: boarding school at Phillips Exeter, undergrad at Yale, an MBA at Wharton, and then a corner office in his Manhattan headquarters. I was the designated heir to the Harrington empire. There was only one problem. I hated the boardroom, and I belonged in the sky. The friction started small. I skipped equestrian lessons to read books on aerodynamics. I snuck out of cotillion practice to watch documentaries on military aviation. But the true breaking point happened the summer I turned 20. I had quietly completed my private pilot's license, while supposedly doing a pre-law internship in Boston. When I came home to the estate, I didn't bring a polished resume. I brought enlistment papers and an acceptance letter to the United States Army Warrant Officer Flight Training Program. I'll never forget the silence in his mahogany-paneled study when I slid the beige folder across his desk. My father didn't yell. Yelling was for people who lacked control. Instead, he carefully adjusted his gold cuffs, looked at the papers, and then looked at me as if I were a stranger who had just tracked mud onto his antique Persian rug. "The military," he said, his voice dripping with aristocratic venom, "is a noble path for people who have no other options in life. It is not a path for a Harrington. You are throwing away a dynasty to become a glorified bus driver in a combat zone." "It's not a bus, Dad. It's a helicopter. And it's my life," I replied, standing my ground. He picked up my enlistment contract, his fingers pinching the corner as if it were infected. "If you walk out of those gates wearing combat boots, Leora, you cease to exist in this house. You will be dead to me. And you will be dead to polite society. I will not have my peers whispering that my daughter threw away an Ivy League legacy to crawl in the mud." "Then let them whisper," I said. I packed 2 duffel bags that night. My mother had passed away when I was young, and my grandfather, Arthur, the only person who ever truly understood me, was away in Europe. I left without a goodbye from my father. He stood at the top of the grand staircase, his face a mask of stone, and watched the heavy oak doors close behind me. I spent the next 6 years earning my wings. I went through the grueling crucible of basic training, the relentless academic grind of flight school at Fort Rucker, and the intense physical demands of survival training. I earned the rank of Chief Warrant Officer 3. I deployed to the Middle East, flew medevac missions under the cover of darkness, and learned the true meaning of loyalty from the men and women who sat beside me in the cockpit. I traded the scent of expensive caviar and champagne for the sharp, metallic tang of JP-8 jet fuel and the deafening, rhythmic thud of rotor blades. And I loved every single second of it. But back in Connecticut, Martin Harrington was busy rewriting history. I assumed my father had simply told his high society friends that we were estranged. I assumed he had written me off. I was entirely wrong. My father was a man who refused to lose a PR battle. Having a daughter in the military didn't fit his aesthetic, but having a rebellious, runaway daughter was even worse for his image. So, he invented a new Leora. I didn't find out about the magnitude of his delusion until my 4th year in the Army, when my cousin Sarah finally tracked me down via a secure social media account. Sarah was the black sheep of the extended family, a documentary filmmaker who despised my father's snobbery almost as much as I did. "You need to see this," she texted me one night, attaching a dozen photos. I sat in my barracks in Kuwait, staring at my phone in absolute disbelief. The photos were from my father's annual Christmas gala. There, displayed on the grand piano in the main foyer, were framed pictures of me. But they weren't my pictures. In one, My face had been expertly photoshopped onto the body of a woman wearing an Oxford University graduation gown. In another, I was supposedly standing outside a sleek glass office building in London, wearing a Chanel suit. Sarah's text bubbles kept appearing. Uncle Martin tells everyone you're a senior VP at a hedge fund in Mayfair. He says you're too busy dominating the European markets to come home. He even faked a spread in a minor financial magazine and leaves it on the coffee table. Leora, he burned all the letters you sent to Grandfather Arthur. He intercepted them. My blood ran ice cold. I had written to my grandfather religiously. I had sent him photos of me pinning on my aviator wings, pictures of my crew, letters about my deployments. Arthur was a Korean War veteran himself. I knew he would have been bursting with pride, but he never replied. I had assumed his dementia had worsened, or that he was too frail to write back. Instead, my father had systematically erased my reality. He had created a phantom daughter to save face at the country club while keeping my grandfather in the dark, letting the old man believe his favorite granddaughter had abandoned him for corporate greed. 2 years later, I was stationed back stateside, serving as a pilot in command for an elite aviation battalion. We were gearing up for a major multi-state training exercise. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone buzzed with an urgent call from Sarah. Her voice was shaking. Leora, it's Grandfather Arthur. He's taking a turn for the worse. The doctors don't think he has much more than a month. I gripped the edge of my desk, a heavy lump forming in my throat. I'll book a commercial flight right now. I have leave saved up. I can be at the hospital by tomorrow night. He's not at the hospital, Sarah said, her voice dropping to an angry whisper. Your father moved him to the estate. He's set up hospice care in the East Wing. And Leora, Uncle Martin is hosting the company's 50th anniversary jubilee this Saturday. The entire estate is going to be packed with senators, CEOs, investors, everyone. He's hosting a party while Grandfather is dying? I asked, appalled but not entirely surprised. It gets worse, Sarah continued. Arthur asked for you yesterday. He was crying, Leora. He asked your dad why you never call, why you care more about London than him. Your father stood right there and told him you couldn't be bothered to leave your lucrative deals to come see him. He's using your absence to play the tragic, stoic father for his investors. He's going to give a massive toast on the main lawn on Saturday, cementing his legacy. A dark, quiet fury settled over me. This wasn't just about narcissism anymore. This was psychological abuse. My father was letting a dying man believe his bloodline had betrayed him, all to protect a fabricated narrative. Sarah, I said, my voice eerily calm, what time is the toast on Saturday? 4 in the afternoon. On the south lawn. Why? Make sure Grandfather's wheelchair is out on the terrace overlooking the lawn. Tell the nurses to bundle him up if it's cold. Just get him outside at exactly 1,600 hours. Leora, what are you going to do? The estate is heavily guarded. He has private security at the front gates for the gala. They have strict orders not to let you in if you show up. I looked over at my flight helmet resting on the shelf, the dark visor reflecting the harsh fluorescent light of my office. I won't be using the front gates, I replied. The next morning, I walked into the office of my battalion commander, Major Hayes. Hayes was a no-nonsense combat veteran who valued loyalty and integrity above all else. He knew my background. We had spent many long nights on deployment trading stories about our wildly different childhoods. Sir, I have an unusual request regarding the cross-country navigational exercise this Saturday, I said, standing at parade rest. Major Hayes looked up from his paperwork. Go on, Chief Harrington. I laid out a topographical map on his desk. Our planned route had us flying 2 UH-60 Blackhawks from our base, doing a low-level navigation route, and landing at a regional airport in Connecticut for a scheduled refueling and public affairs static display before heading back. I pointed to a sprawling green patch on the map, about 10 miles off our planned route. This is the Harrington Estate, 70 acres. The south lawn alone is the size of 2 football fields. Unobstructed approach, clear of major power lines. Sir, my grandfather is an Army veteran, dying of heart failure on this estate. My father has intercepted my communications and is telling my family I'm a corporate executive who abandoned them. Major Hayes raised an eyebrow. And you want to execute a tactical insertion on your father's lawn during a private event? I want to conduct an authorized impromptu public relations fly-in to honor a dying Korean War veteran, sir, I corrected smoothly, keeping my face deadpan. It serves as excellent precision landing training in a confined, high-visibility civilian environment. We drop in, I pay my respects to a brother in arms, we lift off, and proceed to the refuel point. Major Hayes stared at the map for a long, silent minute. He tapped his pen against the desk. Then, a slow, predatory smile crept across his face. "You know, Chief Harrington," Hayes said, reaching for his signature stamp, "community outreach is a vital part of the Army's mission, and we must always honor our veterans. Request approved. Ensure your co-pilot plots the obstacle avoidance for those fancy oak trees." Saturday arrived with perfectly clear skies. The weather was a crisp 65 degrees, perfect flying conditions. I was in the right seat of the lead Black Hawk, my hands resting lightly on the cyclic and collective. Behind me, my crew chief was strapped in, doors pinned wide open, the wind howling through the cabin. To my left, off my wing, was our second Black Hawk, flying in perfect, tight formation. Underneath my flight suit, my heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. At 1,545 hours, we crossed into Connecticut airspace. "Viper 1, this is Viper 2, my wingman's voice crackled over the radio. "We are 10 mics out from the target LZ. "Copy, Viper 2, I replied, switching to tactical approach. "Bring it down low." We dropped altitude, skimming over the autumn-colored forests and winding rivers. Through the headset, I could hear the rhythmic, thunderous wub-wub-wub of our massive rotors chewing through the air. At 1,555 hours, Sarah sent a final pre-arranged text message to a secure tablet mounted on my kneeboard. "He's on the stage. 500 people here. Grandfather is on the terrace. Go." "All right, crew," I announced over the internal comms. "Coming up on the LZ. Expect a high density of civilian personnel. We are going to make this loud. We are going to make it precise. And we are going to kick up a hell of a lot of perfectly manicured grass." Combat approach. The tree line broke, and there it was, the Harrington estate. From the air, it looked like a scene out of The Great Gatsby. A massive white tent was erected near the gardens. Hundreds of people in expensive suits and designer dresses were gathered around a raised crystal podium. And standing at that podium, holding a microphone, was Martin Harrington. I banked the Black Hawk hard to the right, feeling the G-force press me into my seat and brought the nose around, lining up directly with the center of the south lawn. "Viper 2, form up echelon right," I commanded. "Let's introduce my father to the bus drivers." The sound reached them before the shadows did. A low, guttural vibration rattled the crystal champagne flutes on the catering tables. The string quartet, positioned elegantly near the rose gardens, faltered as the thumping pulse of our rotor blades drowned out their violins. Down below, heads began to turn, scanning the cloudless sky. When we cleared the tree line at 75 feet, the sheer panic was instantaneous. Two 64-foot, heavily armored military helicopters do not glide into a space. They assault it. The hurricane-force winds of our rotor wash slammed into the estate's south lawn like a physical wall. A massive, towering pyramid of expensive champagne shattered instantly, sending a tidal wave of glass and bubbly crashing across the manicured grass. The pristine white silk tablecloths ripped free from their anchors, spiraling into the air like ghosts, while dozens of senators, investors, and Manhattan socialites ducked and scrambled, shielding their faces from the flying debris. I kept my eyes locked on the target. "Viper 2, hold perimeter hover," I ordered over the radio. "Viper 1, touching down." I brought the Black Hawk down with surgical precision, landing exactly 50 feet from the grand crystal podium. The heavy landing gear crushed my father's prized imported orchids into the soil. I rolled the throttles back to idle, keeping the rotors spinning just enough to maintain the deafening, intimidating roar of the engines, but safe enough for me to disembark. The smell of JP-8 jet fuel instantly overpowered the scent of expensive perfume and catered truffles. Through the acrylic window of my door, I saw him. Martin Harrington was frozen behind his podium, his tailored Italian suit rippling violently in the wind, his face drained of all color. He looked less like a titan of industry, and more like a terrified man waking up to a nightmare. The carefully curated illusion he had spent 6 years building was currently being vaporized by the downwash of twin General Electric turboshaft engines. I unbuckled my 4-point harness, disconnected my comms wire, and grabbed my helmet bag. "Keep her warm, Collins," I told my co-pilot, shouting over the engine whine. "I won't be long." I pushed the heavy armored door open and stepped out onto the lawn. I was wearing my olive drab 2-piece flight suit, my tactical survival vest, and a pair of dark aviator sunglasses. Pinned to my chest were the stark black wings of an Army senior aviator, right above the embroidered name tape that read, Harrington. The crowd had backed away into a wide, terrified circle, leaving a clear path between the helicopter and the grand terrace. Whispers rippled through the stunned elite. They were looking at my face, the face they had seen photoshopped onto a London executive's body, in my father's study, now attached to a combat pilot who had just invaded their gala. "What is the meaning of this?" My father broke from the podium, marching toward me, his face contorting from shock into pure, unadulterated rage. 3 men in black suits, his private security detail, flanked him, though they looked entirely uncertain of how to handle an active-duty military crew. "You turn those engines off right now!" Martin screamed over the noise, his veins bulging in his neck. "Are you insane, Leora? Do you have any idea what you are doing to my company, to my investors? Get back in that machine and leave my property before I have you arrested for trespassing." I stopped walking and slowly lowered my sunglasses, staring him dead in the eye. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The massive machine idling behind me was doing all the shouting for me. "I am on a federally authorized navigational training route, Mr. Harrington," I said, my voice cold, clipped, and strictly professional. "And I am not here to see you." "You are ruining my legacy," he hissed, stepping closer, though he flinched as a gust of rotor wash hit him. "Senator Davis is here. The board of directors is here. I told them you were finalizing the European merger in London today." "Then I guess you have a lot of explaining to do," I replied, stepping around him as if he were nothing more than a minor obstacle on a runway. His security detail shifted, moving to block my path. I didn't break stride. I looked directly at the lead guard, a burly man with an earpiece. "Interfere with a uniformed federal officer conducting an authorized community outreach mission, and you'll spend the next 10 years in Leavenworth explaining it to a military tribunal." Step. Aside. The guards looked at my father, then looked at the 2 Black Hawks, the crew chiefs sitting in the open doors with their visors down, watching them like hawks. The guards parted. I left Martin Harrington standing helpless on the ruined grass and walked up the marble steps toward the east terrace. The terrace was quieter, shielded slightly from the chaotic wind by the massive stone columns of the estate. The wealthy guests up here parted in utter silence, staring at me as if an alien had just landed in their midst. And there, sitting in a wheelchair near the glass conservatory doors, was Grandfather Arthur. He looked incredibly frail, his skin was pale, and he was bundled in thick cashmere blankets despite the mild weather. But as I walked toward him, his dull, tired eyes locked onto the dark green fabric of my flight suit. His gaze traveled up to the aviator wings pinned to my chest, and then finally to my face. The heavy, cloudy fog of dementia and illness seemed to instantly evaporate from his expression. A trembling, tearful smile broke across his weathered face. "Leora," he breathed, his voice fragile but clear. "Hey, Grandpa?" I said softly, dropping to one knee beside his wheelchair, so I was at eye level. I pulled off my tactical gloves and gently took his shaking, liver-spotted hands in mine. "I'm sorry I'm late." "Your father," Arthur wheezed, tears spilling over his wrinkled cheeks. "He told me you sold out. He told me you went to London for the money. That you didn't have time for an old soldier anymore." "I never went to London, Grandpa," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I reached into one of the zippered pockets on my thigh and pulled out a thick, tightly bound stack of envelopes. Every single one of them was stamped with return to sender or undeliverable. "I wrote to you every week from flight school, every week from Kuwait. Every week from Iraq. I sent you pictures of my first solo flight. He intercepted them all. He hid them to protect his image. Arthur took the stack of letters with trembling fingers. He traced the APO return addresses, the military postage. He looked at the date on the top letter it was from 4 years ago. "You fly the birds," Arthur whispered, looking past me at the idling Black Hawk on the lawn. A profound, deep pride settled into his eyes, just like the medevac boys who pulled me out of the chosen reservoir in '52. "You're a pilot." "I'm a pilot," I confirmed, smiling through my own tears. "Chief Warrant Officer 3, and I came to take you for a ride, if you're up for it." Major Hayes authorized a VIP veteran transport. Before Arthur could answer, the heavy terrace doors slammed open. My father stormed out, followed closely by Sarah, who was filming the entire scene on her phone, and a small group of confused, very powerful-looking men in tailored suits, the board of directors. "Arthur, do not listen to a word she says," Martin yelled, desperation finally cracking his polished veneer. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "She is unstable. This is a coordinated stunt to embarrass the family. I am calling the Pentagon, Leora. You are going to be court-martialed for this." Arthur slowly looked up from the letters in his lap. The frail, dying old man vanished, replaced by the ruthless, razor-sharp titan who had built the Harrington Empire from the ground up. "Shut your mouth, Martin," Arthur commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a terrifying authority that instantly silenced the terrace. "Dad, I said, "Shut your mouth," Arthur repeated, his grip tightening on my arm. He looked past his son and locked eyes with a tall, silver-haired man standing near the back of the group. "William, come over here." William Kensington, the chairman of the Harrington Board of Directors, stepped forward, looking incredibly uncomfortable. "Arthur, it's good to see you, though the circumstances are highly unusual." "William, my son has been lying to the board," Arthur said, his voice ringing out clearly over the distant hum of the helicopter engines. "He told you that my granddaughter was the vice president of our European Acquisitions Division, did he not? He used her supposed corporate brilliance to secure the London merger last quarter. He told you the Harrington succession plan was secure." William frowned, looking back and forth between my father and me. "Yes, Arthur." Martin assured us Leora was spearheading the overseas expansion. That was a key condition of our continued confidence in his leadership as CEO. "Well, take a good look, William." Arthur gestured to me in my flight suit. "She hasn't spent a single day in a boardroom. She is an active-duty combat pilot for the United States Army. Martin didn't just lie to an old dying man to break my heart. He committed corporate fraud to artificially inflate investor confidence. He forged documents. He fabricated a corporate officer." The color drained completely from Martin's face. "Dad, wait. I did it to protect the stock. I did it to protect our name." "You did it because you are a coward who cares more about country club gossip than your own blood?" Arthur interrupted, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. He turned back to the chairman. "William, as the founder, I still retain the paramount voting shares in the blind trust. I kept them precisely for a day like this. As of this exact second, I am exercising my emergency proxy rights. Call an immediate vote of no confidence. Martin is to be terminated as CEO, effective immediately. Strip him of his board seat." "You can't do that," Martin screamed, stepping forward, his fists clenched. "I built the last 10 years of this company, and you built it on a lie?" Arthur replied coldly. "You are done, Martin. Get off my estate." The silence on the terrace was absolute. The board members were already whispering furiously to one another, pulling out their phones to contact their legal teams. The investors on the lawn below were staring up at the unfolding drama, the entire social hierarchy of the Harrington family collapsing in real time. Arthur turned back to me, the harshness fading from his eyes, replaced once again by that gentle, immense pride. "I don't think I can handle a helicopter ride today, kiddo," he said softly, squeezing my hand. "My heart can't take the G-forces anymore." "That's okay, Grandpa," I smiled, wiping a tear from my cheek. I reached to my chest. unpinned the black senior aviator wings from my uniform, and gently pressed them into the palm of his hand, folding his fingers over them. "Hold on to these for me until I get back from my next deployment." Arthur gripped the metal wings as if they were made of priceless diamonds. "I'll guard them with my life, Chief." I stood up, snapped to attention, and delivered a crisp, perfect salute. Grandfather Arthur, with a trembling hand, raised his arm and weakly returned the salute. I turned around and walked away. I didn't look at my father as I passed him. I didn't look at the board of directors. I walked down the marble steps, across the ruined grass, and climbed back into the cockpit of my Black Hawk. "Mission accomplished, Viper 1?" my co-pilot asked, looking at the stunned crowd as I strapped back in and plugged my helmet in. "Mission accomplished, Collins," I said, pulling my visor down. "Bring the throttles up. Let's go home." We lifted off the lawn, banking hard into the blue Connecticut sky, leaving Martin Harrington standing alone in the wreckage of his lies, watching the daughter he tried to erase fly higher than he could ever reach. If you loved this story of family betrayal, military pride, and ultimate justice, hit that like button and share it with someone who appreciates a perfect twist. What would you have done in Leora's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our daily dramatic stories. Support the channel and stay tuned for more incredible real-life storytelling.